This is Open Door with Vince Robinson. In-depth conversations with people who are making a difference in the lives of others here and around the world. Culture is at the heart of who you are. Know your culture, find yourself on Open Door with Vince Robinson.
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to another edition of Open Door with Vince Robinson. My guest today is an international recording artist with 2 CD releases to his credit. He released his single Early Morning Love in 2022, joining his previous recordings of Appreciate the Moment, which debuted nationally in the spring of 2017, as well as his first CD, Joyride. He's a native of Cleveland, Ohio. He was dubbed Cleveland's finest jazz flautist by the Cleveland Plain Dealer and the Northeast Ohio Jazz Society, and was awarded Best New Artist of any category at the Midwest Urban Music Awards. In 2017, his nationally released single, Breezin', received international radio support and charted on the Groove Jazz Music Top 100. It gives me a great deal of pleasure and honor to bring to Open Door with Vince Robinson, Mr. Herb Wilborn Jr. Herb, how are you today?
Vince, I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on your program, my friend.
All right. So you've got quite a musical pedigree, and in your bio, it lists a number of people that you've shared stages with, and we're going to talk about some of those folks. But first, I want to talk to you about Herb Wilborn Jr. Obviously, Junior is important to you, and there must be a senior. So talk to me about who your dad was or is.
Well, my dad, who is my absolute hero, Herbert Wilborn Sr., was, along with my mother, my biggest supporters. And, coming up in the Wilborn household, we had a wonderful, wonderful childhood that, helped round me and helped me be aware of so many wonderful things in life. And I attribute that, of course, to my mom and my dad. I have a Baptist Christian upbringing that has also rooted me in, the belief in God and in Christ. And, as a child, we were exposed to, and when I say we, of course, I mean my siblings. We were exposed to many, many different things that helped challenge us and, help us get confidence. We swam, we fished, we roller skated. My mother took us ice skating, which is a little unusual for, African-American children, but she exposed us to everything. So my mom and my dad, they were quite a pair, and what a blessing it was to come up in that household, Vince.
Yes. It's a beautiful thing to be able to reflect on having parents, because there are so many who don't have that history and long to have a father that they could look up to. And I am a firm believer in honoring our parents. So I'm glad that you have such great, memory of them, as they did
Absolutely.
So much for you. So I have to follow that question by asking you, who is Herb Wilborn Jr.?
Well, Herb Wilborn Jr., that's an interesting question. He's a man of many, many interests. One who always challenges himself, no matter what he involves himself with, to the highest level of accomplishments. And I guess it all started as a kid, again, being exposed to so many wonderful things, and it set me up for realizing that, you can do just about anything you put your mind to at whatever level you choose to spend the time to do that. So, I'm just a fellow that enjoys life and enjoys people, and of course loves to play music. And what else can I say, man? I'm an avid fisherman. I love to go to the bowling alley and bowl, and, along with music, just whatever I can get myself involved with is positive. And I'm a people person, Vince. I'm a people person. I love good people. And if I find a person that I feel is really a quality individual and, has a positive outlook on life, then those are the type of people that I surround myself with.
Yes. So you've been at this for a number of years, and I know you've probably been asked this question before, but I have to ask it. Out of all the instruments that could have been in your hands or at your hands, why did you choose the flute?
And you're absolutely right. I get asked this question all the time. Whenever I'm fortunate enough to be interviewed by someone like yourself, that's always the question that's asked because, it seems that, especially when I started playing flute, that wasn't an instrument that necessarily was geared for males. But I started playing, or was introduced to music in the fourth grade of elementary school, Mount Pleasant Elementary School here in Cleveland. And first of all, all the kids started playing the flutophone, which you may or may not be aware of, Vince. It's a straight plastic little whistle type of things with holes in it.
Oh, I played one. I played
one,
one, so I relate.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I thought so. See, flutophone. So I started on flutophone, and then the music instructor, Mr. Ron Brown at the time, that was teaching music, he was very meticulous in selecting instruments for the students. I didn't select flute for myself. Ron Brown, the music instructor, selected the flute for me, and he based his decision on my mouth and lip structure, how my lips and my mouth and my teeth were formed. So he was saying that I had good lip structure, good teeth structure, and that flute would be an instrument that I should start on. So that's how I got started playing flute. It was really not my decision. But I left it in his hands, and look where we are today.
Well, he may not have known it, but he was also making a great choice for you for other reasons. Not being a drummer, not being a keyboardist that has to lug around these huge instruments for every gig. And Mr. Wilborn walks in with a slim case and a flute.
Well, but let's keep things absolutely 100.
Right.
And I say that to say this. Because I have been the leader of my own ensemble for over 40 years, I'm also responsible for making sure that my sound is correct, as a drummer would or a keyboard player would. So I tote around quite a bit of equipment, PA equipment, microphones, speakers, amplifiers. So believe me, it's not quite as simple as just walking in with a flute. When I show up for,
let me amend that. Let me amend.
Yeah,
that.
please. When I show up for an engagement, I have all of my gear, and I'm usually the last one to leave.
Yeah. I know that story so well, Herb, because that's my quandary, and I see cats like J.T. Lynch walk in and open up their case and step up to the microphone and blow solos and then walk away, and he's long gone, and I'm still packing up and loading my vehicle. So
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
I'm always the last one to leave, man.
Yeah.
Always. And one thing that it's not a hindrance, but it's a delay, is oftentimes when we're done performing, I'm talking to people after we're done playing. Folks like to socialize, and people you may not have seen for a long period of time want to come up and talk with you. So that kind of puts a damper to try to immediately pack up your gear and leave. It never happens where I can just leave right after a performance.
Yes.
Never.
So how long was it before you took on the mantle of being the band leader? I mean, I'm just imagining that you may have gotten called for gigs and stuff, and you may have done stuff with other folks, but at some point you said, I'm going to do my own thing. Well,
in growing up and playing with so many different bands, when you're young, it's difficult to maintain a band for various reasons. Different personalities, people have different opinions of how music should go. Some folks would say they would come to rehearsals and wouldn't come. And, it was just a host of things that led me to decide to name the band after myself. The original name of the group was the Herb Wilborn Jr. Quartet. and that was when in my early 20s. Because one thing that I absolutely knew, Vince, is there was a common denominator in me naming that band Herbert Wilborn Jr. Quartet. That certainly defined that I would be there. I would be there. So, and that means on as far as the performance. So everybody, I decided that was the best route to take because the bands would get together, they'd break up. They'd get together, they'd break up. There was no consistency, so there's no momentum. There's no momentum. There's no recognition. You break up. You spend months getting organized, and you break up. So that's what really determined and led me to make that decision.
Mm-hmm. I have a story about how my group was named. And it was going to be the Vince Robinson Quartet, but somebody told me that it was boring. So that someone was Kevin Conwell. So he said, the Jazz Poets, and I stuck with it, but to your point,
right.
When you manage groups, you have like a revolving door of players sometimes. I mean, I can't tell you how many drummers I've been through over the space of 30 some odd years. But, folks come and go. I can
imagine.
Yeah, but the common denominator is you.
Absolutely. And once you start getting your name out there and people start coming to performances knowing you're going to be there, then, you surround yourself with the best musicians available to you. And, you keep it moving. And, again, fortunately for me, I've done it so long and work hard to do it on a high level that I have the, I kind of have the cream of the crop with musicians that know me and know, what I am hoping they bring to the table. So, fortunately, again, I play with some of the better qualified professional musicians in the area, and that kind of helps momentum and helps keep me growing.
Yeah, and the other thing too that I have observed in seeing you in different places is just the level of professionalism and the quality of the sound.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Some folks, they're way too loud.
Yeah.
There are just so many different issues that crop up in some of the performances, but I've noticed a certain level of professionalism, and I've noticed a certain level of standards that you have when you present your music, whether it's two of you. I watched you and Brian Golden playing next to the free stamp, and it was magical. I'm sitting there thinking, okay, that's a great idea. Maybe just two of us. And I know sometimes economics play a role in that. Sometimes folks just ain't available to do gigs in the middle of the afternoon when they got jobs and they got to make money. So, but
Yeah, well, when you're playing in a duo setting, it really, it forces your hand as a performer to kind of, isolate you to see if you're really qualified to really be able to pull it off with just a duo. Because when you're playing with an ensemble, you've got 4 or 5 other guys who are also wonderful players that kind of take some of the pressure off of you, which I enjoy a lot of times. I enjoy an ensemble because, frankly, I enjoy the guys that are in my band. I enjoy listening to them.
Yeah.
I enjoy listening to them. But the duet, I've done duets for many years with some wonderful, wonderful keyboard players. And it's a little more challenging because there are only 2 of you. So, the growth that you get from doing just duo gigs is you can't measure the growth that you can really obtain doing duos. You don't see a lot of duos any longer either, Vince, if you notice. There aren't a lot of people doing duo gigs.
Yeah. But again, back to the economics piece, sometimes it just makes more sense to be small than to have a whole bunch of people and then everybody's walking away with chump change after a gig. It's so disheartening.
Oh, yeah. Well, you always have to make sure that the musicians are taken care of, because a lot of the guys are doing music full time, as I am now. But I did have an 8-hour job that I retired from in 2017. Actually, 2018. I used to work for General Electric, so I was never solely dependent on music as for an income, but music's always provided an income. But you have to, as a band leader, you have to take care of your guys who are doing music full time, and realize that they have to, they have to make a certain amount of money to live, because they've got kids and the usual financial responsibilities that everybody have.
Mm. Have you ever thought about what your life would have been had you not had to have that career at General Electric?
Well, I've never really given it much thought. Life does what it does, and you accept as it is. I've never looked back and, second guessed the things that I've done up to this point. Had things developed a little more aggressively, then and I would have had the confidence of knowing that music platform could sustain my lifestyle and my family's. At the time I was married, then I would have made a decision, and I would have pursued music on a full-time basis. And remember, back in the early 90s, that's when I released Joyride, my first CD that did well, but it didn't go national. And as you learn the business, you learn some of the mechanisms and some of the people that you really should have involved in your getting your records moving on the next level. But that's something that's not taught. That's something you have to figure out and you have to learn. And of course, now, Vince, the music industry is completely different. Back then, I was actually signed by two record companies. One was Avion Records, and the other one was it's hard for me to remember. It's been so many years. The radio station here in Cleveland, 107.3, Bernie Kimball was the station manager. I think you probably remember Bernie, Vince.
Yes.
Yeah, Bernie Kimball was the station manager, and I met Bernie, and I gave him a copy of my record, and it took him about, I don't know, after me calling a couple of times, it probably took him about 3 or 4 months to actually play it. And once he played it, he called me and said, "Herb, I apologize, man. I should have played this record several months ago. It's really good." And I said, "Well, hey, man, I appreciate it." And he said, "Well, would you mind me sending it off to a few promoters?" And I said, "No, sure, go right ahead." So a few weeks later, I got a call from a record label independent label out of California. And I can't remember the name of that. It probably would pop up in my head eventually. But I got signed to a record contract for 5 years. We were going to do an album a year for 5 years. And that was actually a turning point. And at that time, see, I was not working for General Electric. I was working for someone else. But that was that would have been an absolute turning point for my career had it gone through. Now, one problem that I ran into, Vince, and the record industry ran into, was the recession back in the 90s. A lot of the independent labels did not make it from the recession, and a lot of the labels closed their doors. And unfortunately for me, the label that I was signed with could not survive the recession back in the early 90s. And the label owner called me and was very apologetic and said, "Man, we were looking to do some great things, and but hey, all I could say was it's no fault of yours, and I appreciate the opportunity." So that was one record deal that kind of fell through the cracks. And then probably 5 or 6 years later, I got another record deal, and that company was called Avion. And Avion Records was the president of Avion Records was Joe Simone, and Joe Simone was the promoter that actually got the Daz Band's "Let It Whip" when it went gold or platinum, the "Let It Whip" record. So he opened his own record label here in Cleveland. And my dear friend Ike Wiley, who at the time played drums with the Dash Band, thought enough of me to take my record to Joe Simone. And Joe Simone heard the record. I had a meeting in his office. My attorney and I had a conversation with him. He signed me for 3 years. And 2 months into the deal, poor Joe Simone died in his office of a massive heart attack. So that was another episode of the the possibility of the label taking off and then really pushing me to a national and international level back in the day. So things happen in life, man, and there are only so many things that I can control. I was upset, but I was never bitter. I was never bitter. Things happen, and things that I can't control, I just can't control. It didn't drive me to drinking, Vince. I just kept going, kept doing what I did, man. So that's kind of a little history of a couple of the record contracts that I have had presented to me that I had signed, but they never developed.
In light of the changes that have occurred in the record industry, how are you feeling about your ability to reach that international audience now?
Well, the first label that signed, I just remember the name. They were called Optimism. That was back in the 90s. Optimism Records out of California. As far as now, man, the industry is completely different. They're not labels, or very few labels, that are actually signing artists. There's so many independent artists now that actually have a little more say in the direction of their career. However, it's always a money thing. It's an economic thing. It's a money thing. When I did Appreciate the Moment, I was fortunate enough to get that record to a national radio promoter. And radio promotion, they charge you by the month. They do a campaign, a radio campaign for 3 months, and a 3-month radio campaign is quite expensive. But that's really, literally, without a record label, the only way that an independent can get his music, to various stations around the country and then around the world. You have to have an independent radio promoter that they have to have some type of track record, even for radio stations that they submit to even play the record. Is who knows who a lot of the times. But I was fortunate. I got put the record in the hands of somebody that was well known, and the record did pretty good. Yes.
Wow. I'm just thinking about some folks that I grew up admiring on the instrument that you play, and one of them is Herb Laws. Are there any folks in that idiom that you have gravitated towards?
Well, I mean, you mentioned the top dog, in my opinion. Herb Laws, I was introduced to Herb Laws when I was 16 years old, and the impression that his playing made on me completely redirected, my wanting to have that type of sound. And the biggest thing was, of course, Hubert is a classically known, world classically known flautist. And that was the foundation for him being so prolific in playing jazz, because he used so many tools that he had developed in the classical realm. So that steered me to really wanting to pursue a classical music training, which I did do. I got 7 or 8 years of training at the Cleveland Institute of Music from the top of flautist instructor at the Cleveland Institute at the time, Joseph Juhos. So that put me in a whole different mindset, because I wanted to sound like Herb Laws. I mean, I wanted to be able to execute and have my music as clean and as crystal clear as Hubert. So, I mean, that was one of my biggest influences on flute.
I'm recalling a long time ago, somehow I ended up at your house. You were in Maple Heights at the time, and I remember you had this elaborate recording situation there. I may have recorded something, or I may have shared something with you, but I'm just imagining now the level that you're operating on now. Do you do most of your own recording, or are you doing stuff in studios, or what?
Well, actually, the appreciate the moment. I have recorded other artists. I have a wonderful in-house studio that I've learned a lot about studio recordings and mixing and all of that good stuff. But I found myself really not really wanting to do that level of the production side. I just wanted to do some arrangements and performance. So I kind of shied away from it because it was taking up too much of my time of recording other artists and really not staying focused on my own development. So though I still do have a recording studio, if I'm doing a record, which the Appreciate the Moment record I did at another facility, I would prefer leaving that up to an engineer that has much higher level of engineering than myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can imagine. It's always good to have somebody who knows what they're doing what
Absolutely.
they do to make you sound your best. You play R&B tunes, you play jazz tunes, you play your own stuff. Do you play a lot of your own music when you're out doing performances?
Oh yeah, anytime I get the opportunity to play some stuff off of my own record, yeah, we absolutely do that. One of the challenges is making sure that you have the right guys who can play your stuff. But I've been fortunate again. All of the guys that I've been so lucky to have in my band are top professional, and they look forward to challenge. They look forward to playing different music, and so to answer your question, absolutely. I always, especially the record that did well in 2017 that hit the charts and did really well. We always do the George Benson arrangement of Breezin'.
Okay. Any other go-tos for you?
As far as music goes?
I know you like to play Stevie Wonder.
Well, I love all music, man. I'm not restricted. I'm just, if there's a song that speaks to me, then, I certainly give it an opportunity. There's some songs that are more conducive to playing, especially on flute. Flute's a totally different animal than saxophone and trumpet and violin and trombone and all these other instruments. Flute's a very different animal. So you got to be really selective. So to make sure that you choose songs that the flute can really express itself with. I can express myself with it. So, it's not a one size fit all type of play whatever. No, I'm pretty selective in what I choose to play.
Yeah.
I love Stevie. I love all R&B because that's the era that we grew up in.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting, Herb, because I never really thought about those dynamics, but I'm just juxtaposing that lead guitar versus a flute, and it seems like that's a battle that you would never win.
They're different. They're totally different. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you learn as you're coming along, what song and what music, really, really highlights the instrument. And, I love playing ballads because ballads are very beautiful and challenging and dynamic. And, you're able to really, really, really put the full effect of the flute when you're playing ballads. And I think most musicians, no matter what the instrument is, would probably agree with me on that. Ballads are really the music that really makes all instruments really, really shine.
Yeah, and two, I think the ballads kind of pull folks in. I can't remember who it was, but it was somebody who said, if you want to get somebody's attention, whisper.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's juxtaposed against the saxophone, which, folks talk about mimicking the human voice, and ladies love saxophonists and saxophones and whatnot. But how does that measure up for you as a performer when it comes to the ladies?
What, as far as
being the flautist, the flautist instead of being the saxophonist? Has there ever been a moment where you thought, maybe I should have picked up a sax?
No, man. Again, I've never looked back at the decisions that I've made and the path that I've been so blessed to be on. That's never been an issue. It's not a competition.
Yeah,
it's not a competition. And frankly, it's so funny. A couple of my musicians in my band said just last week, man, you should play saxophone. You the way you playing that flute. I said, well, I've owned saxophones in my day. I've owned an alto and 2 soprano saxophones and an ewee that I played around with and played them halfway decently. But the instruments required time, and the time that I spent learning and getting my performance at a halfway decent level, it didn't speak to me. It wasn't part of me. The flute is actually a part of me. So I no longer pursue I didn't pursue the instruments any longer. But I have owned them and could play them halfway decently. And maybe had I stayed with them, I probably would have been pretty efficient on them. But it was a decision that I made, and no, I never looked back, Vince. I never sat there and thought about, I should have played this. I should be playing what I was given to play.
Yeah. Well, in my case, I played what was there. I mean, there was a piano in the house. So when I was 5 or 6 years old, I just started playing the piano, and I stuck with it. I've had a desire to play other instruments, but because I've put so much time into piano, to pick something up now, there's a certain learning curve involved, and it takes a while before you really get proficient. So
yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
It
takes time.
Mm-hmm. I look at cats like Najee. He doesn't have an issue going back and forth between the two, and there are a few others who do that. But you play what you love, and if you play it well, why would you want to play anything else? We can't all be Prince.
No, and I tell you something, if bringing up Najee actually, being a student at the New England Conservatory, as was Nelson Rangel and a few other great players. Now, they focused on those particular instruments, and when you're in school, and again, you're not married, you don't have kids, and you make that decision to play those instruments, and he does it extremely on a high level. That's something that he develops, and that's something that he loves. He loves both instruments. He loves flute and saxophone, because if you notice, Vince, on any of his recordings, there's always 1 or 2 flute tracks on his recordings, because he plays flute so well. So, that's one of my heroes too. Najee is absolutely one of my heroes.
Yes. Well, I'm looking at your bio, and I see that you've shared the stage with him, Grover Washington, Gerald Albright, Kim Waters, Ramsey Lewis, Joe McBride, and Marcus Johnson, who was actually one of my heroes. Matter of fact, I stole
keyboard man.
I stole one of his tunes.
Good. You borrowed.
I appropriated it. He calls it right now. I call it now right.
There you go.
But talk to me about some of these folks that you've appeared with.
Well, as you're playing, like, of course, being from Cleveland, and getting some notoriety and getting some exposure. Back in the day, there was Club Isabella, there was the Boarding House, there was 6th Street Under, so many different venues that we played, man. And some of these venues decided back in that time that they were going to bring in some national artists. So me having performed there in several of these places, and we brought a very good, consistent crowd in, and people really enjoyed the music. I was asked by some of the club owners, hey man, I'd love for you to open for, Kym Waters. Kym Waters came in town Sixth Street Under, John Story and Larry Field, who used to own Sixth Street Under, approached me and said, "Hey man, we'd love for you to open for Kym." And we did, and we had a great time, man. We had a great time. Kym and his crew were like, "Man, you cats need to be on the road with us." I mean, we really put on a good show. The Ramsey Lewis thing, we opened for Ramsey in Cincinnati. Cincinnati, this was back in the day, Vince, when Cincinnati didn't even have a jazz festival. They have an annual jazz music festival every year now. When that first got off the ground, I was hired by the promoter to put that show together to open for Ramsey. So we traveled, from Cleveland, and they put us up in the hotel and the whole business. And I got a wonderful opportunity, man, to meet Ramsey and his crew. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful thing. When you meet guys, when you meet guys on the road and you have a little interaction with them, it's such a cool thing because they're just human beings, musicians, just like you, out there trying to survive. Yeah. That's kind of the bottom line, man. We often look at some of the musicians, and who knows, I might even be viewed this way as, somebody that's untouchable because his name is out there, because this and that. But they're just human beings, man, that play music and gifted to play. And everybody that I've been so fortunate to share the stage with, they love to play. They just love to play music and love to make people happy. Mm. So those experiences are really cool, man. Even opening for Gerald Albright and Najee, the Gerald Albright thing was kind of cool because, I can't remember. I've met Gerald several times when Gerald used to come in town to State Theater and everything. I used to go down there and meet him, man. And at the time I knew enough people that they got me backstage passes and all this other stuff. So I would go backstage and meet Gerald, and several years later, boom, I'm opening a show with Gerald. So, and we had known each other prior too. So that was kind of cool. So those stories just keep evolving. Now, not the Najee story, and Najee and I are best friends to this day. Again, down at Sixth Street Under. I was performing down at Sixth Street Under with my band, and Ike Wiley, who played drums with Najee at the time, Najee was at the State Theater. And, Vince, back in the day, man, we used to play 3 long sets. We used to start at maybe 9:30 and finish at like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, Najee's gig probably started at 7 and they were done by 10. So Ike Wiley brought Najee down to Sixth Street Under where I was performing. And he walked in and, at the break, Ike introduced me and I said, "Hey man, you got one of your instruments with you?" And he said, "Yeah, man, I got my flute." I said, "Well, come on, man, up on the next set and come do a tune with us." So he agreed. He came up, and instead of 1 tune, he did 3. Mm. We tore the house down, and Najee and I have been best friends ever since. Wow. 30 plus years later.
Mm. That kind of reminds me of Lim Adams and Roy Ayers.
Yeah.
And
absolutely. That passion, man.
Right. And that the solo that Lim did when he played with Roy, I ain't never heard Lim sound that good.
Yeah. They bring out the best of you, man.
Yeah. I'm telling you, it's phenomenal. I bet Lim probably looks at it and says, "Wow, where did that guy come from?"
Yeah, where did he come from? Yeah. Hey, that's a sure sign of inspiration, though, man.
Yes.
You get inspired.
Right.
You get inspired, man, and you start doing things that you didn't realize, you felt like they were in you, but they pulled them out. They pulled that stuff out of you. Yes. Expressively. So, yeah. I can imagine. I wish I had been there. I wasn't at that show.
Yeah. Well, I just saw the solo on Facebook, and I was absolutely blown away. My level of respect for Lim went up several notches after I saw that.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So,
that's good stuff.
What about my hero, Marcus Johnson?
Marcus Johnson came in. There was a gentleman by the name of, and Ed is still Ed Pitway, and Ed Pitway actually was doing Jazz on the Lake. He was doing a Jazz on the Lake series down at the marina, Edgewater Park Marina. He had rented the facility, and it was an outdoor facility, and he hired a sound man, and he hired, prior to even being on the lake, Ed had a few other engagements that he included me in because he was really getting into the promoting. He wanted to really promote jazz. So Ed brought in, I was very fortunate. Every time Ed would have a show, he would call me. We opened for Marcus Johnson, Pamela Williams, the saxophonist, and also Linn Roundtree, the trumpet player, who's done quite well internationally. Linn Roundtree out of Detroit. So that's how I was able to, open for these particular individuals, because Ed Pitway thought so highly of me and my crew that he would always include us whenever he would bring a national act in. And Marcus is such a cool guy, man. We had such a great time on stage together. I opened for him, but he also opened his stage up to me to come up and play with him when he was doing a couple of tunes. And as a musician, once you kind of know what you're doing, you're kind of comfortable if somebody calls a tune. And you're efficient enough to be able to be expressive. So that was big fun. Same thing happened to Linn Roundtree. I opened for Linn, and when Linn's show came around, he called me on stage, said, "Hey man, I want you to play a tune with us." So lo and behold, I'm back on stage with Linn Roundtree. So yeah, it's just a mutual respect, man, that the guys give you, and they recognize as a musician how hard you've worked to get your sound to be a certain way. And it's just a mutual respect, knowing that they can call you on stage and you're not going to get up there and make them look bad.
Yes. I'm looking at the names and I'm seeing Grover Washington, Gerald Albright, Joe McBride, Marcus Johnson. And I think that the label is contemporary jazz. Then you have traditional jazz. Do you feel comfortable with the label of smooth jazz when your music is described, or are you a jazz purist? Where are you on the spectrum? I've never been a big fan of the term smooth jazz. I've never embraced that. Back in the 70s when Grover was really putting his mark on defining what contemporary jazz was and still is, I'm kind of a stickler for the industry changing that whole terminology of smooth jazz. I don't even know what smooth jazz is, but it was changing. Yeah, I'm not a big fan. I often try to maintain the contemporary jazz title, and I've noticed that a couple of other musicians are doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. Who are saying, no, this is a contemporary, this is not smooth jazz. But the industry, and one thing about the smooth jazz label, Vince, is it puts the sound of jazz in a specific category. So if your sound doesn't fit that specific category of smooth jazz, or how it's defined by certain musicians, then, it becomes more difficult for your music to be accepted and your music to get the type of exposure that it should. If you remember back in the day, when the contemporary jazz craze was really going strong, you can look back and remember the Yellow Jackets. Yeah. You can remember Chick Corea and his Electric Band, or just Chick Corea. I mean, that music was so progressive, man, and so wonderful and so interesting that, that encompasses the whole contemporary jazz movement. That, along with Grover and, of course, Gerald Albright and Najee and all these cats. But now you don't hear music like that. You don't hear a Yellow Jackets type of music.
or Chicory Electric Band type of music, because it doesn't fit the smooth jazz, quote unquote, title.
Yeah.
So, if you listen to, and I think you can attest, because you're a very studied and observant musician yourself, man. You go and you listen to Sirius XM, you never hear things that really perk your ears up, to say, oh man, who is this? Because most of the music all sounds the same. It all starts sounding the same.
Yeah.
And all of the saxophonists, and I don't have anything against saxophonists or anybody else, and I applaud them for whatever level of success they have obtained. But there's so many of them, they all sound alike.
Yeah, I think
they all sound alike.
Yeah, I think that's actually mirrored in the popular music too. I mean, people are using software to enhance the sound of the voice, so everybody sounds like they have the same voice.
Yeah, I'm telling you.
Yeah,
the production's the same.
Yeah,
everybody's trying to fit that mold so they can get on the radio.
Yeah, well,
rather than be individuals and be experimental and try something different, man, and something with some flavor.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I'd like to see, Herb, is I would like to see a for real jam session in Cleveland. And it could just be a musician centric thing. It could just be musicians showing up and let's see where things go. But, we have this situation here in Cleveland where you've got all these moving parts and all these different bands, and gigs go, or people pick up gigs, based on who's paying the most. And everybody's playing the same songs and nobody's rehearsing. And it's just,
I know.
Just crazy.
Well, years ago, and this is where a lot of musicians like myself, Dave Thomas, Russell Thompson, Kenny LeGrand, a lot of the guys, we cut our teeth at jam sessions. We would go to jam sessions all the time, from the Native Son that used to be on Kinsman, Maxwell's that used to be down on 22nd. I mean, we were always at jam sessions, dude, always. And that's where you really learn to play. I mean, I played a two-year gig twice a night at the Native Son with Eddie Backus, the wonderful organist Eddie Backus Sr., and we kept the stage open for anybody that wanted to come up and play. So, that whole thing has, I mean, there are still jam sessions. Don't get me wrong, Vince. As a matter of fact, I think Myron Gardner and his band, they do a thing every second or third Thursday, open mic, for anybody that wants to come up and play, which you may not have been aware of. But yeah, there are still some opportunities to do an open, to perform at open jam sessions. Me, myself, I'm not that interested in doing that because I've done it for so many years that it doesn't interest me. But some of the other younger players that want to get some exposure, sure, that's a wonderful springboard, because a lot of musicians, a lot of these guys, man, I don't even know half of these youngsters now that are actually coming up and playing. But the jam session would certainly give them exposure and possibly even a gig.
Let me switch gears and ask you, since you brought up the young people, what do you think about the direction that jazz is taking now?
It's still very strong. It's taking on a wonderful direction. And one thing about the music is it will always be relevant. It will always be relevant. I think one of the things that we actually are not benefiting from is not having a local radio station like we once had with 107.3 The Wave that promoted and played a variety of music. They say out of sight, out of mind. If you don't expose the youngsters to the possibility of some of this more elaborate and more difficult things to play, then the only option that they really are seeing in front of them is leaning towards, some of the easier stuff to play, and that's kind of how they develop. So, but I'm very optimistic about music as I've always been. Jazz will always be relevant. It will always have an audience. It will always have musicians, performing the music. So, it's everlasting, my brother. It's everlasting. It'll never go away.
Well, it may not go away, but I know that it is such a small piece of the musical spectrum, and jazz audiences a lot of times tend to be older folks, being on the board of the Cleveland Jazz Orchestra and attending events. I mean, I just see the reality of it. I go to festivals like Pittsburgh and Detroit.
Yes.
And, it's the same thing. I see young folks that are involved, and I'm thinking of this young man named Nehemiah Baker. I don't know if you know Nehemiah, but this young drummer is phenomenal. I mean, it just there are I'm going to call them children, comparatively speaking. But
that's fair. That's fair.
But it's like they're just so gifted and they embrace the music. So I don't really worry about the music dying or anything like that, because I know you hand the baton off. But I just wish that more young people could be connected to the music and enjoy it as much as we do.
Yeah, and exposure is everything. It's like I had mentioned even in the beginning of our conversation. My mom and dad exposed me to everything, and it gave me an opportunity to not only, pick a path that I thought I would want to get involved with, but it gave me options. It gave me options to decide, well, I don't want to, I play classical, but I don't want to play classical. I can do R&B, but I want to be a jazz musician. But that was only because the exposure. If you give youngsters exposure, you give them an opportunity to make decisions. And if they can make decisions, then they have an opportunity to be creative in their decision making. But if you're only giving them a little box to decide from, then you're really doing them an injustice. So the more exposure, and this is something that I encourage some of the more mature audiences that support me and have supported me over the years. I always mention, if we're doing a show out in a park, bring your kids, man. Bring some of your kids, your nephews, your nieces, your neighbors' kids. Bring some kids so they can hear things they typically don't get an opportunity to hear. And you never know what that exposure can do for a youngster's decision, because a lot of times, people will come up and say, man, I've never heard a flute sound like that. Well, you gotta be there in order to experience it, and you gotta expose the children, because that impression that I put on you can be the same impression that could be the next Hubert Laws or the next Herbert Wilborn or whomever.
Amen.
But if you never expose them,
if
you never expose them, man, it's just, you're not giving them a chance.
Yes. Amen to that. The next Herb Wilborn Jr. I like the sound of that.
Oh,
Herb,
that's kind.
It's been a pleasure to have you on the air today, and I wish you nothing but success. And I'm looking forward to the next Herbert Wilborn Jr. CD. So,
Vince, thank you so kindly, man. Thanks for thinking enough of me to want me to be on your show, and I'm hoping that something that I've said may inspire some of the younger listeners to to take the challenge of being professional musicians, not from learning beats, but actually learning how to read music, learning how to compose.
That's the key.
Those type of important things. Learning, not taking the easy route of a beat machine or something. Go learn the piano, learn chords, learn inversions, learn all of these important elements of music that are so beautiful, man. And I've always said this, man. Playing music makes you smarter.
Absolutely. I'm sure
yes, sir.
Elijah Gilmore would agree with you wholeheartedly.
Yes, absolutely.
His thing is emotional intelligence, so that's his mantra.
Yes.
And I'll let him stick to it. Again, thank you for joining me on Open Door. And if you want more, you can go to herbwilbornjr.com. That's herbwilbornjr.com. and you can find out all you need to know about this fantastic flautist who has been on the air with us today. As always, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, and make today your absolute best day.